a family that runs a major restaurant group. That was my husband's family. For my mother-in-law, who had a husband who was the next head of the family, that status was the most glorious thing, and I, who was raised by a single father, seemed to be nothing but a stain on the family. To her, a daughter-in-law from a lower family background was an insignificant existence that deserved to be ignored. However, the situation changed dramatically when my design was adopted for the menu proposal of the restaurant run by my father-in-law. My mother-in-law had also studied a bit of design, but it seems she was eliminated in the first round of screening. She said things like,
"It's just a lousy piece I scribbled,"
out of spite, but to compare such a thing to the work of a professional designer like me was absurd. After that, her behavior changed from ignoring me to outright bullying, as if she couldn't stand to see me, who had only one parent, succeed. She started visiting the house where my husband Carlton and I lived, making snide remarks and complaints.
"Eleanor, there's dust behind the TV. How can you be satisfied with such cleaning? What kind of upbringing did you have?"
She would start nitpicking as soon as she arrived. Carlton, looking weary, would respond,
"I did the cleaning."
Since Carlton worked from home and was naturally cooperative with housework, the division of chores naturally fell more on him.
"Eleanor, did you push the housework onto Carlton again? What kind of wife are you? Prioritizing work over housework. I never neglected either my work or my household duties."
She would change the topic and continue to criticize. Even when Carlton tried to stop her, she would keep yelling until I apologized. When I said, "I'm sorry, I'll do better," she would smile with satisfaction and leave. Carlton would always sigh at his mother's attitude. "I'm sorry. I'll try harder with the housework."
No, it's clearly just my mother's spite. I'm sorry for being unreliable.
Carlton would always caution her, but she never listened to her son's opinions. Carlton had consulted his father about it, but seeing no change in his mother's behavior, it seemed that he was too busy with business to remember to caution her. Well, I thought I could just endure my mother-in-law's poor attempts at sarcasm. She would mellow out with age eventually. Or so I thought, but I never imagined she would do something like that. Carlton's cousin got engaged, and a celebration was arranged. In addition to family, work-related people were also invited, and it seemed they had rented a hall in a luxury hotel that could accommodate 70 people for a grand event. The day after Carlton informed me of this, I received a call from my mother-in-law.
"Since it's a celebratory event, we'll leave some of the dishes to the venue, but the main dishes will be prepared by the family. Each type of dish will have a person in charge. So, I have a proposal. Eleanor, you boasted before that you were good at cooking, didn't you?"
Her tone was sarcastic, but I did remember saying that I was good at cooking since I had helped my father from a young age.
"If it's bad after raising expectations, it will only be embarrassing later." "Well, whatever, you're in charge of Italian cuisine."
Before I could respond, she concluded the conversation on her own and hung up. Well, I resigned myself to it as usual, adjusted my work schedule until the day of the event, and started selecting the menu for the Italian dishes. Everything went smoothly until the day of the celebration. Looking back, it was just the calm before the storm. On the day of the engagement celebration, I received a call from my mother-in-law on my smartphone. The time was 11:30 a.m. The event was to start at 1:00 p.m., so my mother-in-law, who was the overall supervisor, should have been busy with the final checks at the venue. Wondering why she was calling, I answered.
Oh, Eleanor? I checked the food, but please stop making such terrible dishes. I was so shocked that I threw them all away.
She spoke in a high-pitched voice, and I couldn't quite grasp the situation. I'm sorry. I'm at the office right now, working. I was rushing to finish some urgent work to make it in time for the celebration.
Humph, you're so shocked you can't even speak. There's no time until the 1:00 p.m. start. Hurry up and remake it.
What should I do? The conversation wasn't making sense. Could it be that my mother-in-law didn't know I had switched responsibilities today? Finally realizing this, an unpleasant thought crossed my mind. Calm down, me. What did my mother-in-law just say? She threw away all the food? Actually, a few days after I was assigned to Italian cuisine, I had to switch roles with the person in charge of sending invitations due to some circumstances. She said she would inform my mother-in-law, who was the overall supervisor, so I didn't worry about it at all. Please listen carefully. I am at the office right now. I've been here since morning. I was taken off the cooking duty, so I was working during my free time. I spoke slowly, trying to make her understand.
Then, what about this food?
She muttered absent-mindedly, and then I heard her gasp.
What are we going to do? There's only an hour left until the start. This is your responsibility. You didn't report it. Yes, that's right. You need to fix this. Otherwise, I'll say you were the one who threw it away.
She was so flustered that she was spouting nonsense. However, it would be troublesome if she spread rumors that I had thrown it away. Reluctantly, I apologized at the office and hurried to the venue. I barely missed the train and arrived at the venue a little after 12 o'clock. I had already explained the situation to Carlton via email, so as soon as he saw me, he rushed over, looking pale. Oh no, was I too late?
The food was in the waiting room, but there was a commotion because the Italian dishes were missing. When I went to the kitchen, the food was clogged in the sink.
It felt like a murder scene with a tense atmosphere. My panicked mother-in-law said,
Eleanor threw it away. The fact that she's not here is proof enough.
She apparently accused me directly. Suppressing my headache, I told Carlton, I'll go to the scene right away, and entrusted him with a request. When I arrived at the kitchen, my mother-in-law, who had spotted me, yelled,
Eleanor, what have you done?
Around us were Carlton's aunt, his cousin who got engaged, and his fiancée Emma, along with several relatives who had heard the commotion. Everyone turned their accusing eyes on me at once, but I calmly corrected them. I did not throw away the food. Immediately, my mother-in-law shouted,
Don't play dumb. How could you ruin such a celebratory event? You're an ungrateful disgrace to this family.
I was working this morning. It was you who called me and said the food was thrown away, wasn't it?
How dare you? Not only do you always look down on me, but now you're trying to pin this terrible crime on me.
Like a tragic heroine, my mother-in-law passionately appealed to those around her. Unfortunately, it seemed that my mother-in-law, who had been a daughter-in-law for over 20 years, was more trusted by the relatives than I, who had only been part of the family for a few years. I felt the accusing eyes focus on me again. Then shall we contact the office to prove that I was working this morning? I suggested. That would eventually reveal the truth and show that my mother-in-law was lying. I decided to fight back, but then my father-in-law spoke up unexpectedly.
There's no need for that. I had entrusted Eleanor with a task. It was a sudden job, but she kindly accepted it.
Behind him stood Carlton, looking relieved. I thought he might be too busy to help, but Carlton's request to his father had been successful. As expected, the trust in the next head of the family was different. The eyes on me turned awkward, and the suspicious looks shifted to my mother-in-law.
So, Eleanor, about the phone call earlier.
She said she tasted the food and threw it all away because it was bad. She told me to remake it over the phone. The surrounding people murmured at my testimony. Among them, a voice suddenly burst into tears. It was Emma, Carlton's cousin's fiancée.
It's true that I don't usually cook Italian food, but I worked hard to make it delicious.
She cried out in a broken voice and clung to her fiancé's chest. Yes, she was the one who had switched roles with me. She was the main person in charge this time and had confided in me about her surprise plan to have everyone taste her cooking. She had asked me to keep it a secret from everyone, but I hadn't expected her to keep it a secret from the person in charge, my mother-in-law.
If Emma's cooking is bad, then it means my taste, which hired her for our family restaurant, is also bad.
No, that's not what I meant.
She shouted in a panic, but it was too late to deny it now. Emma is a chef at the restaurant run by my father-in-law. A professional. And she had his endorsement.
Your tongue must have gone bad because you only speak ill of your daughter-in-law.
He sighed with a hint of sarcasm. My mother-in-law clung to him, apologizing profusely. Isn't it someone else you should be apologizing to? Even if Emma's cooking was bad, throwing it away was the worst thing you could do. Unable to bear it any longer, I spoke up, and my mother-in-law's expression turned to anger as she grabbed me by the collar.
I thought it was your cooking. I thought the food made by a woman from a single-parent family like you would be disgusting and unworthy, so I kindly threw it away. If I had known it was someone else's cooking, I wouldn't have thrown it away. It's your fault. You set this up.
She spat and shouted at me. Frowning at her disgraceful behavior, it was Carlton's aunt who raised her voice.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that being from a single-parent family is disgraceful, knowing that I'm divorced? I heard that the late grandmother also lost her mother at a young age. By that logic, this family must be full of disgraceful people.
Her gaze was cold, as if looking at an insect.
No, that's not what I meant. I didn't know.
It doesn't matter. Now we know your true nature.
My mother-in-law trembled and sat down on the cold kitchen floor.
Well, what a commotion.
Turning around at the sudden voice, I saw an elderly man in a wheelchair. It was Carlton's grandfather, the current head of the family.
I heard such a loud commotion, so I wondered what was going on. I don't know the details, but throwing away food is unacceptable.
He nodded.
My late wife once received some corn from a field at her evacuation site. She said the sweetness of that corn momentarily eased the sorrow of losing her mother.
The room fell silent.
Food carries the thoughts of those involved. My wife often laughed and said she was saved by the kindness of the person who made it. Treating food with disrespect is less than human. We don't have such people in our family, do we?
He directed his question to my father-in-law.
Of course not.
Satisfied with his answer, the head of the family left the room. The words of the head of the family were absolute. At least, the decision of my father-in-law to divorce my mother-in-law seemed like an appropriate action to everyone. My mother-in-law, who had boasted about being the wife of the next head of the family, understood the strength of the head's authority more than anyone, so she knew that no matter what she said, it wouldn't change anything. She was made to apologize to all the relatives, and she tearfully apologized for ruining the celebration and for her disrespect towards food, which was a serious offense for a family involved in the food industry. Regarding the division of property, it was agreed that a small amount of money would be provided after deducting the compensation for ruining the celebration. She was kicked out of the house and ended up in a small apartment for a single person. Shunned by all the relatives, she had no one to rely on and lived a lonely life. She probably never imagined that she would fall this low after throwing away the food out of ridiculous jealousy towards her daughter-in-law. My mother-in-law did something unforgivable and received her due punishment.
How did you like this story? Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.